All right, welcome back. All right, so here's what we have. According to the factory service manual, the Kent Moore tool, model J-23372 holding tool, and you can see a depiction of it right there in the manual. That is to be used to hold the differential carrier set in a bench vise so that you can unbolt the ring gear and do various other things to the carrier assembly so you can rebuild it. So I've taken it upon myself to recreate in a very crude fashion that particular tool using some scraps I had laying around the shop. This bottom piece already had some holes drilled in there from some other project. I can't recall what for. This other stuff is 1/4-inch bar stock that I had from the local big box, and a piece of 1-inch pipe here welded to that. And to extend it up a little bit, I had a leftover handle from a breaker bar. This is actually from a tool, so I welded that in there. It's a little bit thinner to get up through the hole in the carrier assembly. And this basically just goes into the bench vise, thusly. And I just cut off a little piece of rubber heater hose. Slip that over there like that, keep that from damaging anything inside the carrier assembly, and this will prevent the carrier assembly from rotating as we loosen the bolts on the ring gear. So we'll show you how this works. There we go. And this piece slips up in there and it grabs against one of the side walls inside there and prevents the whole thing from turning. So now I should be able to get a wrench on all these bolts and loosen them, and then we'll bring this over to the bench and remove the ring gear. All right, before we start that, we need to make a mark here, or at least remember to install this ring gear in the same exact position it was removed. The service manual, comically, says put a scribe mark between here and here to make sure that happens. Well, this is really hard steel. I don't have anything to make a scribe. I'm not going to make a mark in my ring gear. I'm just not doing that. So it just makes sense that you've got a part number listed right here. It says BC 1491555. That's the part number of this ring gear. That matches with the other part numbers I've seen. I've got the Master Parts book inside. And that lines up with the 293 right there. So let's just remember that, you know, to line up the part number directly above the 293, and we're good to go. All right, let's get a socket wrench on here and loosen these bolts. All right, these have left-hand threads, by the way, on this ring gear, so they're going to loosen like that. Some of these are tighter, some of these are looser. I know one thing, this hold down fixture really makes the job a lot easier. All right, they're all loosened now. So book says to remove 3 of them, leave the rest in but loose. And we're going to put in some guide pins for the disassembly. So I don't suppose it's critical that we put the same bolts back in the same location, is it? Maybe. Let me get a piece of cardboard. All right, I took out 3 of them so we can put our guide pins in and made a little diagram, and basically I'm just going to put the same bolts back in the same holes. I know it's probably not necessary, it's not an engine. However, just to be on the safe side, and I'm a maniac, so you know what, just deal with it. It'll be okay. All right, let's get this thing back on the bench and get this ring gear off of here. All right, so the bolts are left-handed threads, right? The manual says install guide pins in 3 different holes, and then once you get all the bolts out, you use those to tap the ring gear off. Okay, fair enough. I'm assuming the guide pins, as they call them, are threaded with left-hand threads so that they go into these holes. This is a much smaller 3/8 bolt, just a regular bolt to have the head cut out. And it goes all the way down to the bottom, so tapping on that might work. I don't know how tight it is though, as far as the press fit goes. It may be really tight, and you may need, in fact need the 3 left-hand threaded guide pins. I really don't know. So let's just take the bolts out and see how far we get. So I got a really long skinny punch here. We're just going to give that a shot. Okay, it's clear to me now that I'm going to need a proper tool for this. I can't be hacking around trying to tap this ring gear off of this press fitting without a proper tool. So the manual has what they call guide pins. These ring gear bolts are 7/16 by 20 left-hand thread. You can get a narrow punch all the way down to the bottom of the hole and tap in there. I can get this 3/8 bolt down all the way and tap on that as well. However, I'm just a little bit worried about tapping on the bottom of the hole. I think I would much rather find a proper bolt that's long enough, thread it in, and then tap on that, and then you have all of that surface area of all of those threads, which is really the right way to do it, in my opinion. So, having said all that, I have ordered a quantity of 4 7/16 by 20 left-handed thread bolts, and they should be here in a couple of days. So right now I'm at a stopping point, and when those come in, we're going to get this ring gear off of our carrier set. All right, let's take a look at another little doodad that we bought for this project. Special, I might add. As you know, I've been having a hard time trying to find a crush sleeve. Here's the original one. Clearly crushed in the past, but no longer useful. That's loosey-goosey down in the bore. Apparently somebody tried to reuse it. Of course, you can't do that with a crush sleeve. There are no crush sleeves available for the rear end on an early 70s Cadillac, at least not that I've found. There may be one out there somewhere under a different part number. I just haven't found it yet. However, I've also considered a bearing spacer with shims as a replacement. I started down that rabbit hole and came up with this. In the previous video, you noted that I was looking at a bearing spacer for a 1974 Chevrolet K10 pickup truck with a 350. And there was a bearing spacer with shims on there from USA Gear, and this is what I found. This is the part here, SK CSG MT12T, solid sleeve replacement spacer pinion preload, part number 55046. So there you go. So clearly this is way too long. Now, the trick to this is you need this end to be the right size for the inner pinion bearing, and you need this surface to be the right size for the outer pinion bearing. And those are 2 different sizes, only by a slight amount, however. Now, you'll note that this bearing spacer has been compressed on this end. You can see this transitional area. There's a very pronounced taper here. Okay, so now clearly this is too long. So what I'm going to do is measure the original pinion crush sleeve for this car. I'm going to take this down to a machine shop, and I'm going to have them cut it here and here so that we have the right dimension here and the right dimension here for the use on our old Cadillac. And to show you what I'm talking about here, on the big side we're looking at 1.667 inches, and on the little side we're looking at 1.634, which is not a lot, but it matters because the inner bearing has a ID of 1.4278 or so, or thereabouts, and the outer bearing has an ID of 1.29 or thereabouts. So the smaller end of the bearing spacer fits precisely with the outer, and the bigger end fits precisely with the inner bearing. So it looks really good. It looks like this is a workable solution. So what I'll do is I'll cut this thing down to the length of the original crush sleeve, or maybe a tad bit longer. Not sure, but probably not. I may just cut it to this length since we have shims. We have actually quite a lot of them actually. So I don't know how much that is. How many, let's see, how many shims do we have here? Let's zero that out, crunch that down some. 77 thousandths, if you can believe that, cheap tool. Whatever, we got whatever length this is, plus that should probably be okay. But in order to get it as accurate as I possibly can, so the next thing I'll do on the pinion, I'm not going to worry with it today. The next thing I will do is take our new inner bearing and I will install it onto the pinion shaft. And that way I can measure from this side of the bearing to the absolute closest spot where this outer bearing stops. Okay? The outer bearing is a slip fit onto the shaft, and the inner bearing is a press fit. You can't go down. Anyway, so we're going to put the new inner bearing on, and then we will slip this one into place and until it goes down to the farthest it can go, and then we'll take a measurement between those two, and then I think I will cut the bearing spacer to that length and then shim it from there. Well, all right, there you have it, folks. I think we're going to cut this video off right here. I guess I would say sorry about the short video this week, but we did have a holiday in between the last video and now, so family does take priority over fun hobbies. So along the way, though, I think we have found, at least, I believe we have anyway, I think we found a crush sleeve solution using this bearing spacer, which we will modify. These shims, they fit over the smaller end, not the larger end, so when you slip them over the pinion shaft, they only go down that far, so they will go in front, so I think that'll make our job a little bit easier when we start fitting this together. I will say that the Cadillac pinion housing is probably a little bit easier to work with, albeit the parts are unavailable, but if they were, it would be a lot simpler because the pinion assembly itself comes off of the car and you can work with it completely by itself and then get everything set up on it before you install it. So I would say that all things being equal, it has an advantage over different models. However, it's an old car with some irregularities, and it is what it is. So we've got the bolts out of the ring and pinion gear assembly here, but I've got some parts on order to tap this ring gear off of here, so waiting on that. Along the way, we also crafted together a little tool to help us disassemble the carrier assembly. It looks pretty awful, but it does the job, so what can you say about that? All right, folks, I hope you all had a wonderful Thanksgiving holiday. That's all for now. I appreciate you guys stopping by the channel. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And if you'd like to be notified whenever I release a new video, don't forget to click that little bell down below. You guys have a good one, and remember to enjoy driving, maintaining, and restoring your classic Cadillac.